It's a clear day. You're standing on your balcony being cuddled by the sun's warmth. Suddenly you hear people shouting, "Run! It's molasses!" You look down the street and you see a huge wave of black liquid charging through the street, engulfing cars, destroying buildings, and you think to yourself, this must be a dream. Hey, I'm Alex Lam, and in this episode of Stories of the World, we'll be talking about the Great Boston Molasses Flood. This is a disaster story that was the fault of human greed. And it's important we talk about this because it's never worth it to put someone's life in danger to make a little extra money. In this story, a company put the whole city in danger knowingly. So let's get to the story. First, what is a molasses? Molasses is the byproduct of sugar refining. When sugar is made into what we're all familiar with, molasses is what's left over. At room temperature, it's thick and gooey, about 40% thicker than water. And for majority of the people, molasses isn't a pleasant smell. Molasses are normally used as sweeteners and sometimes used for producing ethanol and rum. So what's a regular household ingredient? How the hell was there a flood? Well, in 1919, it was about 1 year away from the Prohibition, which was a nationwide ban on production, importation, transportation, and sale of alcoholic beverages. So alcohol companies had two choices. One, close up shop as soon as possible and move on, or two, ramp up production and make as much alcohol as possible before the Prohibition. A company called Purity Distilling Company did the latter. At their facility near CUNY Square, Boston, they built a giant tank to store molasses, which when fermented produces ethanol. The tank measured 15 meters high, 27 meters in diameter, and held 8.7 million liters. When they were building the tank, they cut corners. I mean, they're only going to use the tank for a year. Why would they want to pay the full cost? The tank was built with the wrong metal, and the walls of the tank were half as thick as they were designed to be. While the tank was in use, it was leaking molasses from the sides, and instead of realizing shit's about to go down and fix the tank, they just painted the tank brown so you wouldn't notice the leaks. It's a disaster just waiting to happen, and it finally did. On January 15th, 1919, the temperature rose to 4 degrees Celsius, warming the molasses and causing its thermal expansion. And at around 12:30 p.m., the tank exploded. Witnesses reported that they felt the ground shake and heard a roar as the tank collapsed. A long rumble, similar to the passing of an elevated train. Others reported a tremendous crashing, a deep growling, a thunderclap-like bang. The 8.7 million liters of molasses spewed on all sides, traveling at a speed of 55 kilometers an hour. It picked up buildings from its foundations. People were picked up and thrown. A truck was picked up and hurled into the Boston Harbor. Edwards Park wrote a one-child experience in 1983 article for Smithsonian. Anthony DiStasio, walking homeward with his sisters from the Michelangelo School, was picked up by the wave and carried, tumbling on his chest almost as though he were surfing. Then he grounded and the molasses rolled him like a pebble as the wave diminished. He heard his mother call his name and couldn't answer. His throat was clogged with smothering goo. He passed out, then opened his eyes to find 3 of his 4 sisters staring at him. The wave was so strong, it bent steel panels of an elevated railway track. It was a complete disaster, but the 8.7 million liters of molasses wasn't the only problem. The metal from the tank bursting was weaponized molasses and used to crash into buildings. 21 people died, over 150 people injured, and several horses was killed. The aftermath, I quote from Boston Post, "Molasses waist deep covered the streets and swirled and bubbled about the wreckage. Here and there struggled a form. Whether it was animal or human was impossible to tell. Only an upheaval, a thrashing about in the sticky mass showed where any life was. Horses died like so many flies on sticky fly paper. The more they struggled, the deeper the mess they were ensnared. Human beings, men and women, suffered likewise. The aftermath was just as bad. 116 cadets were first on the scene, followed by the Boston Police, Red Cross, the Army, and Navy personnel. Nurses and doctors set up makeshift hospitals because there were so many injured people. It was like a war zone camp. The cleanup took months because everything was covered in molasses. It spread into subway platforms, to the seats inside the trains, to payphones, into homes, commercial buildings, you name it, it was probably there. Cleanup crews used salt water to wash away the molasses and sand to absorb it. The inner area took weeks to clean, and that's with several hundred volunteers. And it took even longer for Greater Boston and its suburbs. After everything was over, local residents brought a class action lawsuit against United States Industrial Alcohol Company, which bought Purity Distilling in 1917. The company claimed that the tank had been blown up by anarchists because apparently some of the alcohol produced was to be used in making munition, but you know, it's obviously BS. The court ordered the company to pay $629,000 in damage, which in today's money is about $10 million. So much for the plan for making as much money before the prohibition. It's said that on a hot summer's day, people in Boston can still smell the molasses. Sweet smell of greed. Boston City has a small plaque at the entrance of a park which commemorates the disaster. Like I said at the beginning of the video, this could have all been prevented, but due to human greed, it made them cut corners and put people's lives in danger. It's simply outrageous, right? So here's a question for you guys. If you can change the flood material, what would it be? Like, instead of a flood of molasses, you can have like a flood of M&Ms, or maybe a flood of money. Now, a flood of money would be good. Can you imagine like 2-story high $100 bills just crashing into buildings? That would probably be the best flood. Anyway, let me know in the comments below. So that's the story of the Great Boston Molasses Flood. If you guys enjoyed this video, hit the like button and subscribe if you want to hear more stories. Also, be sure to check out my previous videos. I'm Alex Lam, and this is Stories of the World. Happy with that?